A homeless mother loses the only chance to save her baby when a billionaire's card slips away, testing fate, faith, and the cost of one delayed act of kindness. She wasn't begging for money, she was begging for her baby's life. Before this story continues, take a moment and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? It was early morning, the kind of morning where the city wakes up slowly, wrapped in grey clouds and tired breaths. Rain fell gently, not loud enough to scare people indoors, but steady enough to soak anyone left outside. Cars passed one after another, splashing water on the broken road, their engines loud, their windows tightly closed. By the roadside stood a woman. She was thin, her shoulders bent forward as if life itself had pressed too hard on her back. Her dress was old and heavy with rain, clinging to her body. In her arms, she held a baby, small, fragile, wrapped in a thin cloth that did little to protect her from the cold. The baby's cries were weak, almost like whispers, as if even crying required strength she no longer had. The woman's name did not matter to the people rushing past. To them, she was just another shadow on the street. Another problem they didn't want to solve. Some glanced at her for a second, then looked away. Others didn't look at all. She didn't shout. She didn't chase cars. She didn't wave her hands in the air. She simply stood there. Her arms tightened around the baby each time a cold wind passed. She gently rocked her back and forth, her lips moving softly as if singing a lullaby only the two of them could hear. The baby's head rested against her chest, her tiny body shaking. "Please hold on, just a little longer." The woman stretched out one hand, not too far, not too boldly. Her voice, when it came, was low and tired. "Please, help me. My baby hasn't eaten." Rain mixed with tears on her face, though it was hard to tell which was which. Her eyes were red, not just from crying, but from long nights without sleep. Last night, there had been no food. No warm place to lie down. Only the cold ground and fear that sat beside her until morning. People nearby whispered. Why would she bring a baby out in the rain? Maybe she's pretending. You never know with these people. She heard them. Every word. But she said nothing. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She only looked down at her baby and brushed water from her tiny face. How does a mother explain hunger to a world that has never felt it? Another car passed. Then another. Time moved, but help did not come. Her legs began to shake. Her arms felt heavy, yet she refused to put the baby down. The baby's cries grew softer, weaker, until they became small sounds of discomfort. The woman closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. I can endure the rain. I can endure the hunger. Just don't take my child. She adjusted the cloth around the baby again, shielding her as best she could. Even in that moment of weakness, her body stood like a wall between her child and the world. This was not a woman asking for pity. This was a mother standing between life and loss. Her desperation was quiet, driven only by a mother's instinct to protect her child. 1 second later, and he would have missed her forever. Inside a sleek black SUV, the city blurred past like streaks of grey and gold. Rain droplets clung to the glass, catching the morning light as the driver navigated through Lagos' slow, bustling traffic. Dominic, a man who owned skyscrapers, companies, and fortunes, sat in the back seat, hands folded neatly, eyes distant. He was thinking about his big meeting, the one that could change the course of his business forever. Deals, contracts, investors, nothing could distract him. Or so he thought. Then, through the rain-speckled window, he saw her. A woman, soaked to the bone, clutching a tiny baby to her chest. Her dress was heavy with water, her hair clinging to her face. She didn't wave or call out. She simply stood there, still as if waiting for something she might never receive. Dominic leaned forward instinctively. His heart skipped a beat. Why did this woman make me pause? He wondered. I have no time. I have a meeting, but something about her. She looked fragile. Defenseless. Yet there was a quiet strength in the way she held that baby, as if she were the only thing keeping the child alive. Her eyes were tired, red, but fixed forward, focused on nothing and everything at once. The city around her rushed past, people going to work, cars honking, but she stood frozen in a bubble of despair that no one noticed. Dominic's breath caught. He imagined the cold water soaking her skin, the small cries of hunger that no one seemed to hear. Could one person's life really mean so little to the world around them? He shook his head slightly, his suit damp from the rain outside the window reflection in his mind, though the glass separated them. What if I keep driving and someone else stops, or worse, nobody stops at all? The traffic crawled forward, and Dominic made a decision faster than he realized. Stop the car, he said, calm but firm. The driver looked at him, confused. Sir. Just stop, Dominic replied. Already unbuckling his seatbelt. The doors opened, and the cold rain hit him immediately, soaking his polished shoes and expensive suit. Yet Dominic didn't flinch. Every step toward her felt heavier than the luxury he carried, heavier than the weight of his meetings, contracts, and obligations. Each splash of water was a reminder of the fragility of life outside his gilded world. He walked slowly toward her, careful not to startle, careful not to make this moment about him. She looked down, unaware of his presence. Her arms were still wrapped around the baby, rocking her gently, whispering soft, soothing words that only the two of them could hear. Dominic's chest tightened. 1 second later, and he might have driven past her, lost to the endless rhythm of his own life. But he didn't. A single decision interrupts his powerful life and brings two very different worlds together. This wasn't pity, this was the first time someone truly saw her. Dominic stepped fully into the rain, his suit now soaked, his shoes slipping slightly on the wet asphalt. The cold didn't bother him, not when he saw the exhaustion written in her face, the trembling in her small hands as they held the baby. Hannah looked up at him, startled by his sudden presence, unsure whether to be afraid or relieved. Good morning, Dominic said gently, his voice calm but steady. What's her name? Julia, Hannah replied softly, clutching the baby closer. Her lips quivered, but she didn't ask for anything else. She didn't need to, her eyes told the story of hunger, fear, and hopeless nights spent on the streets. Dominic knelt slightly to meet their eyes. How can someone survive like this, day after day? He thought, feeling a lump in his throat. He didn't offer words of judgment. He didn't ask for proof or explanation. He simply saw what no one else had, the pure, desperate love of a mother fighting to protect her child. Have you eaten today? He asked. Hannah shook her head, too tired to speak more. And you, he continued softly. You need to eat too. Without waiting for an answer, Dominic signaled to his driver. Soon, they were seated in a small restaurant, the smell of warm food filling the air. Plates of rice, fried plantain, and chicken appeared. A bottle of milk was warmed for Julia. Hannah hesitated, unsure if this was real, unsure if she was allowed to eat first. Can kindness like this really exist? She wondered quietly. Eat, Dominic said firmly, but gently. There's enough here for both of you. She looked at him, then at Julia, and finally, she began to eat. Slowly at first, as if afraid that the warmth and abundance might vanish the next second. Each bite was a relief, each sip of milk a small miracle. Dominic watched silently, giving her space, letting her regain strength without judgment or hurry. After the meal, Hannah began to speak, her voice trembling. Sharing pieces of her life that she had carried alone for months. The parents she had lost, the man who had promised marriage and vanished, the night spent on cold streets. Dominic listened, eyes soft, heart heavy, understanding that this was more than hunger, it was survival, endurance, and courage no one had noticed before. She's not asking for handouts. She's asking for hope, he realized. Then, carefully, he placed some money on the table. Not as a charity, but as a bridge, a tool to give her control, to buy food and safety for her baby. Take this, he said quietly. It's not a gift. It's help for you to stand, even just for today. Hannah looked at the money, tears mixing with the remnants of rain on her face. She shook her head. I can't accept this, she whispered. Take it, Dominic repeated, meeting her gaze. You and Julia deserve it. He fed them, listened to her story, and offered help beyond temporary charity. He didn't just hand her a meal, he gave her dignity, respect, and a first glimpse of hope that felt like a lifeline. Hope fit inside that small card, and then it fell. After ensuring Hannah and Julia were fed and warm, Dominic leaned back slightly, reaching into his wallet. From it, he pulled a simple business card, white, unassuming, but holding a promise that felt larger than its size. Here, he said gently, placing it in Hannah's hand. Call me after my meeting. I'll come for both of you. I promise. Hannah's eyes widened, the weight of disbelief and gratitude mixing in a silent storm. She clutched the card as though it were gold, as though it could hold all the hope she had been carrying alone for months. Could someone really keep a promise like this? She thought, her heart trembling with cautious optimism. Dominic smiled softly, his gaze lingering on her exhausted face and on Julia, now peacefully resting in her mother's arms. You and Julia deserve safety, warmth, and food every day, he said. This card, it's just the first step. Hannah nodded, her lips quivering. She didn't speak, afraid that words might break the fragile thread of hope she had just grasped. Her hands, still shaking slightly, held the card against her chest. This could change everything, if I can keep it safe, she thought. But the world is really that simple. In the brief moment that Hannah adjusted Julia on her back, the card slipped from her fingers. It fell quietly to the floor, unnoticed by either of them. The tiny slip of paper lay against the wet tiles, almost invisible, yet its absence would soon create a chasm of worry and doubt. Dominic glanced at his watch, noting the time with a twinge of impatience. He had an important meeting waiting, foreign clients expecting him, and yet his thoughts kept returning to the mother and her child. You'll be okay, he said softly, more to himself than to her. Then, with a final nod, he stood, leaving Hannah sitting there, unaware that the lifeline in her hands had just vanished. As he walked toward the door, the morning sun glinted off the wet pavement, highlighting the card's edges just enough to catch a fleeting reflection. Yet neither Dominic nor Hannah noticed. She rose shortly after, thinking of how she might call him once the meeting ended, while he was already stepping into a car that would carry him away from her sight. What if she doesn't call? Dominic wondered silently, a flicker of unease passing through him. There was no way to know that the card, a simple piece of paper, was no longer in her possession. That small, fragile link between two worlds, so full of promise and hope, had slipped away quietly, setting the stage for confusion and fear. Hannah held Julia closer, unaware of the card at her feet. I must not lose this chance. I will find a way, she thought, determination sparking in her tired eyes. But for now, the uncertainty began its slow creep into both their hearts. Unnoticed by both of them, the card slips away, setting up a tragic misunderstanding. They were both waiting, and neither knew the truth. Hannah sat under the small awning of a roadside shop, the bright morning sun now high in the sky. Julia was asleep on her back, the tiny child's soft breathing a fragile rhythm against the chaos of the city. Hannah looked around, watching black SUVs, taxis, and motorcycles pass by, each one a cruel reminder that the help she expected might never come. Did he really mean what he said, or was it just a kind lie? She wondered, her heart tightening with worry. Hours passed slowly. Her stomach, once full from the morning meal Dominic had bought, now reminded her of hunger. Sweat dampened her forehead in the scorching heat, and Julia shifted slightly in her arms, murmuring in her sleep. Every passing moment that brought no familiar black car made her pulse quicken. She tugged at the tiny pocket inside Julia's clothes where the card had been, her fingers brushing empty fabric. Her chest tightened. No, it can't be gone. Please, it can't be gone, she thought desperately, tears pooling in her eyes. Around the city, Dominic sat in his sleek office, the meeting long over, but his mind refusing to leave the woman and her child. He had waited, eyes fixed on his phone, expecting the single call that would confirm they were safe. Minutes turned into hours. Calls and emails to clients blurred into background noise as he kept glancing down at the empty notification screen. Why hasn't she called? He asked himself, worry pressing like a heavy weight. Back on the roadside, Hannah tried to summon courage, rocking Julia gently. She whispered soft promises to her baby, trying to convince herself that someone kind would appear, that the promise of help was real. Passers-by glanced at her with fleeting pity or outright indifference. Some muttered about how people sometimes pretended to be poor for money, but Hannah ignored them, focused only on Julia's warmth, her soft breaths, and the fragile hope she clung to. Time blurred. The sun began to shift westward, casting long shadows across the city streets. Hannah's hope began to mix with fear. The card was gone, and with it, the only bridge to the promise Dominic had made. She pressed Julia closer, whispering, "Mommy will find a way, we'll be okay, somehow." Her voice trembled, but her spirit, though shaken, refused to break completely. Meanwhile, Dominic's worry deepened. He tried to rationalize it, maybe she lost her courage, maybe she thought it was a trick, but every image of the small mother and her baby in the rain returned to him, vivid and undeniable. He could not shake the thought that something might have gone wrong. Each minute without a call was another pang of guilt, another second of imagining them alone, hungry, exposed. The city hummed around them, cars honking, vendors shouting, life moving forward. But for these two souls, time seemed frozen, suspended in a shared anxiety neither could fix. Hannah clutched Julia, staring at every passing black car, every glinting reflection, searching desperately for a sign that help was still possible. At the same time, the billionaire waits for a call that never arrives. This card wasn't lost, time was. Dominic's sleek black car rolled to a stop at the edge of the street where he had first seen Hannah and her baby. Rain had long turned to a pale drizzle, the day fading into a dull, grey evening. His heart pounded as he stepped out, scanning every passerby, every shadowed corner, desperate to find the mother and child who had so briefly entered his life. Where are they? Why can't I see them anywhere? He walked briskly, eyes darting from one street to another, past flickering shop lights and crowded sidewalks. And then, something caught his gaze, a small, crumpled card lying near the gutter, soaking in rainwater. He bent down, picking it up gently, his fingers trembling. The name and number he had written with such care now seemed fragile, almost mocking in the wet, torn paper. A cold realization gripped him. I was too slow. I waited, I hesitated, and now it's too late. The city around him blurred as guilt surged. Each missed moment replayed in his mind, the pause at his office, the endless rationalizations, the assumption that someone else might help them first. His chest tightened, and a quiet ache spread through him, heavier than any deal, any transaction he had ever faced. Could one man's delay really feel like cruelty? Yes, he knew it could. And it had. Dominic's gaze swept the street again, desperate, anxious, almost pleading. Every passerby, every moving figure, sparked a tiny hope, only to have it crushed as he realized none of them were Hannah or her baby. The wet card in his hand felt heavier with every second, a reminder that kindness, when postponed, can fail those who need it most. He sank onto the curb, rain dripping onto his expensive coat, mingling with tears he hadn't realized he was holding back. How could a moment's hesitation cost so much? The thought burned inside him. He replayed the smile he had glimpsed on Hannah's tired face, the tiny curl of Julia's hand around her mother's finger, and the silent plea that had gone unanswered. Time had moved forward for everyone else, indifferent to the fragile threads of life that had connected in that brief encounter. Dominic gripped the card tightly, wishing he could undo every second that had passed, wishing he could rewrite a path that might have saved them from hours of fear, hunger, and uncertainty. But the city offered no rewind, no chance to step back into that exact moment. In that quiet, dripping street, he finally understood. It wasn't just the lost card, it was the delay, the hesitation, the fraction of time he had taken for granted. It had become a weight, a measure of his guilt, a reminder that even the richest hearts can fail when action is postponed. Doubt, guilt, and regret hit him as he realizes kindness delayed can become cruelty. That night, she didn't sleep, she survived. Hannah huddled under a thin, soaked blanket, her baby pressed close to her chest. The cold night air pierced through her worn coat, and every distant sound of the city felt magnified, footsteps, car engines, even the soft hum of neon lights. She rocked her baby gently, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Stay strong, little one. Tomorrow will be better. Hours passed slowly, each one heavier than the last. Hunger gnawed at her, and fatigue tugged at her eyelids, yet she forced herself to stay awake, scanning the streets as if her eyes alone could summon help. She could hear her baby's quiet whimpers, a fragile sound that made her heart ache with both fear and fierce determination. Could the world really be so cruel to leave a mother and child alone in the rain? Tears mixed with raindrops on her face as she held her baby tighter. I have to make it. We have to make it. The thought was simple, almost a mantra, yet it carried the weight of everything she had lost and everything she hoped to find. Every instinct screamed at her to give up, to let despair take over, but she refused. She had chosen hope once, and she would choose it again, no matter how heavy the night felt. She whispered softly to her baby, stories of warmth, safety, and love, imagining a brighter morning when hunger and fear would be replaced by care and comfort. She imagined returning to the street corner where a stranger's kindness had briefly touched her life, hoping the same miracle might happen again. Every shiver, every ache, every tear became a vow, a promise that she would survive this night, not just for herself, but for the small life in her arms. The night seemed endless, yet she did not falter. She counted the minutes, the sounds, the distant flickers of light, drawing strength from her child's tiny heartbeat, steady and fragile against her chest. We will see the sun again. We have to. With each passing hour, the night. As terror slowly transformed into resolve. She would not allow fear to win, she would not let the world take her baby's chance at life. As the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, Hannah stood, exhausted but unbroken. She adjusted the baby in her arms and stepped forward, toward the place where hope had briefly touched them before. Every step was heavy, but each carried the weight of her courage and determination. She chooses hope over despair and decides to return to the same place at dawn. Just when hope was dying, fate spoke again. Hannah had returned to the same street corner, her baby clutched tightly in her arms, eyes scanning every passing face with quiet desperation. Each car that passed seemed like it could carry salvation or disappointment. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and longing. Could this be the moment when everything finally changes? Then, a familiar car slowed near the curb. The driver leaned out, his eyes widening as he recognized her from that rainy morning. "Are you Hannah?" he called gently. Relief and confusion washed over her simultaneously. "It's really them, someone remembered, someone cares." The driver quickly helped her into the car, shielding the baby from the chill of the morning air. Inside, he explained what had happened, the card that had slipped from her grasp, the misunderstanding that left them both waiting, the billionaire who had been desperate to reach them. Each word lifted a weight Hannah didn't fully realize she had been carrying. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she listened, a mixture of sorrow for the lost hours and gratitude for the rescue finally arriving. She looked at her baby, safe and warm in her arms, and whispered softly, "It's okay now, we're okay." The tiny fingers curled around hers, a quiet acknowledgement of survival, of the bond that had carried them through the darkest night. "We almost lost everything, but we didn't." The driver navigated the streets with careful precision, bringing them to a place of safety and care, where warmth, food, and protection awaited. Hannah's heart swelled with emotions she could barely name: relief, gratitude, disbelief. After hours of cold, hunger, and fear, she could finally breathe, knowing that her baby's life was no longer in jeopardy. She realized how fragile hope can be, how a single moment, a single recognition, can change the course of fate. Every anxious step she had taken that night, every tear shed in silence, had led her to this point. And now, the hands of strangers had reached out with compassion, turning despair into relief, fear into safety. Hannah hugged her baby closer, whispering promises she could now keep. The streets that had seemed merciless just hours before now felt like the threshold to a new beginning. Sometimes, the world waits for the right moment to show its heart. The misunderstanding breaks, and help finally reaches her in time. Real wealth isn't money, it's what you do when no one is watching. The billionaire watched Hannah and her baby settle into a safe, warm home, his mind heavy with the memory of the lost card and the hours of uncertainty it caused. How many moments of suffering could have been avoided if only I had acted faster? The weight of delayed action pressed on him, yet he refused to let regret end the story here. He stepped forward not just as a rescuer, but as a guide, offering Hannah stability and a chance to reclaim her dignity. Together, they planned the future: access to work, childcare, education, and a safe environment where she and her baby could thrive. No charity handouts, no fleeting pity, only empowerment. He wanted her to feel seen, capable, and respected. Hannah, cautious at first, began to trust again. Each act of kindness from the billionaire was paired with encouragement, respect, and a belief in her own strength. She started to understand that her life could hold more than survival, it could hold purpose, growth, and a renewed sense of hope. "I didn't know life could feel this possible." In these moments, he reflected on the lessons learned from that small, lost card. How often do we judge quickly, assume a story we do not know, and leave kindness delayed until it's almost too late? He realized that real power lies not in wealth or influence, but in the decision to act humanely when it matters most. Hannah's laughter returned slowly, first in whispers to her baby, then in moments shared with those who had extended their hearts to her. The bond between mother and child grew stronger, now supported by trust and security. The world, once indifferent, now held space for their dignity. As the sun rose on their first morning in a new life, the billionaire observed quietly, humbled by the impact of his choice. A single act of responsibility had transformed despair into hope, helplessness into purpose. The story of the lost card became more than a caution. It became a testament to the power of timely action and compassion. The story closes with a powerful reminder about judging others too quickly and the cost of delayed kindness.